America and democracy. There is no America. There is no democracy. We no longer live in a world of nations and ideologies. The world is a college of corporations, inexorably determined by the immutable bylaws of business. The world is a business. And I have chosen you to preach this evangel.
For all my free market healthcare robbing, stock stealing, retirement fund fucking with niggas. Fuck you little credit card scamming, jewelry stealing, crack selling, liquor store robbing motherfuckers. Shout to the homies, Carnegie, OG, Willie Randolph Hearst, Baruch, Rockefeller, the real Rockefeller, my main bitch Leona, pour out a little Louis XIII, Scott Rothstein, Jack Abramoff, hold your head, my Rothschild niggas, let's get this money. I spend my day peppering America overseas, pension for the workers, nigga please, embezzlement, etiquette, private settlement, I'm better with Confederate rhetoric from my mansion in Connecticut, foreclose of it, close out the tenement, I twist words like a speech impediment, I hope you got good credit, bitch, if not, better get a new job with benefits, while I play golf with niggas and get cheddar with, new money buys brand new carrots, my old money bunch of great grandparents, you got grills in your mouth, I ain't mad at ya, I own every gold mine in South Africa, thanks baby, you made me a billion, plus I own a building, for each one of my children's children.
And we are live. Welcome to Voice of Rebellion Radio. This is your host, Chris J. Tonight on Sunday night, February 5th. And tonight we're talking about the United States war machine and talk about the continuing warmongering by the military-industrial complex and my predictions on what's going to happen on Donald Trump and, where will be the next target for the United States government, and what do I make out of the potential change in the situation in Syria, which I don't really think there's going to be much of a change in Syria. As you see, that Donald Trump continues to support Israel, which Israel supports the Syrian rebels, and whatever Donald Trump might say about that he will stop funding the Syrian rebels, I think most of his cabinet supports it. You have Rex Tillerson. It's an interesting story because Rex Tillerson is known for being somewhat a little bit more pro-Putin than our last Secretary of State, and that's been the major thing that's been brought about by Rex Tillerson. Which, of course, I really question how pro-Russia anyone's going to be that's involved with the oil business, which they want to eliminate their competition, which is Russia. And Russia, if you know, has a state-owned business. It's not like a private-owned business, Gazprom. Gazprom is probably a competitor from any oil CEO's perspective. They're going to be looking, hey, Gazprom is the major competitor. So I could see why they would be wanting to destabilize the Russian government so they could potentially privatize the oil industry, and then they could get in over there. But right now, foreign oil companies are not really in. And Russia also supports Venezuela, a big oil market they can't get in. They support Iran. That's another one that they can't get in. These are some major what have been considered enemies to the United States, but allies to Russia. And from a oil CEO's point of view, I don't really see how Donald Trump making good relations with Russia would benefit you. And I know Tillerson's an ex-CEO. However, I see that people think that his connections with the oil industry is going to be beneficial to the relationship between the United States and Russia. I think that his connections with the oil industry is going to be non-beneficial. And I see a major conflict of interest. And it's the same, it really, to me, it's almost a joke that the CEO of the oil company can become the Secretary of State. And you also have the giant real estate magnate, Donald Trump, becoming the president. It really does seem like a government of billionaires, which is what this government has been for a long time. However, now it seems to be symbolic of that. With Trump as your president, Tillerson as your Secretary of State, DeVos, another billionaire, as your Secretary of Education. A little background DeVos is that DeVos is part of the Amway fortune. Amway as many people see it, is kind of like a pyramid scheme that pretty much just, they sell all kinds of stuff and they have all the lower people give the money to the bigger people at the top. It all ends up going to a few people, the DeVos family, Richard DeVos being the man who owns Amway. They're a giant company. I mean, they're not just in the United States, but they're in other countries. And another thing that should be noted about Amway is Amway, the owner of Amway, owns a basketball team, which they own the Orlando Magic. So just that puts in perspective, because sports franchises don't come very cheap, and that these people own one of them. And there's a few other examples of this inside the Trump administration, which, again, this is no different than before the Obama administration, the Bush administration, but people keep trying to say that it is different, that Trump is going to somehow be different than the last few administrations, and that also one of the big eyebrow raisers when people say that he's going to finally change our relationship with Israel. And you hear Donald Trump talking about changing a relationship with Israel, making it even more stronger than before. So if Donald Trump wishes to stand up to Israel and finally stop giving them all these billions of dollars every year, he hasn't really made a signal of that yet, nor has he done any actions to set that up. Donald Trump was very quick on the stroke of the pen, at least symbolically, with a lot of these early executive orders. You think that maybe one of the first things he would have done would have cut off the aid to Israel, which it's a gigantic amount of aid that's being sent to Israel, over $5 billion a year. While we have cities here in the United States that are crumbling, we have Detroit, we have Chicago. In Chicago, that Donald Trump has talked about that his desire to fix Chicago, but in his methods, very questionable. Talk about the deployment of federal troops to deal with Chicago. Trump hasn't really signaled anything much different than any other member of the military-industrial complex. And he talks about how he wants to improve a relationship with Russia. But he's going to antagonize all their allies. He's going to, like you see in this campaign, he still listed Russia as an enemy. And he's still going to harbor people in his administration that are known to be anti-Russia, and mainly, and the people that he's going to work with over here, like people like Marco Rubio, that's anti-Russia. That's one of the major ones that comes to mind. He's also I'm pretty sure you hear even his VP Mike Pence isn't known to be pro-Russian. And you got also Chris Christie, I'm pretty sure, is anti-Russia. Chris Christie was talking about shooting down Russian planes in Syria during the campaign. And so now are all these people going to flip? All these people that have been known to be part of the establishment for all these years are going to flip their stance on Russia and, go against what the people at the top, the bankers, want, which is to antagonize Russia. Because Russia doesn't have a Rothschild bank, they want to corner Russia, isolate them, sanction them. And I don't see Trump, having some kind of easement of relations between Russia and the United States. Trump's also another thing about that's odd is that you hear Tillerson is quickly already antagonizing Venezuela. And Venezuela is one of Russia's, bigger allies. I mean, it's when it comes to the region of South America, Venezuela is probably right up there. I mean, it used to be Brazil was their biggest ally in South America, but now that's no longer going to be the case with Temer now the president. And the government now having fallen to the coup government that has taken power. The coup government is probably going to make better relationships with the UK and Western countries. So they're out of the picture. Argentina also used to be a major ally of Russia. Maybe not as big as Venezuela, but they were a major ally. But now that they're controlled by Mauricio Macri is a strong ally of the United States. That's done. So now you got mainly Venezuela, Bolivia, Ecuador. That's going to be Russia's allies in South America. But the problem is now is, okay, when it comes to if Russia's going to make a relationship with the United States, if that Russia, what's Russia going to do? Are they going to give up the relationships with these countries in South America? I think Putin's a little bit more wiser than that. And Putin's not going to sacrifice relationships that actually are there for one that'll never happen, and that is the relationship between Russia and the United States with the current structure. Now, after a revolution and this government being toppled, yeah, there might be a possibility of a relationship between Russia and the United States, and I think it would happen actually. But with this current structure, and even people say, well, this is not Obama, this is a different man, but Donald Trump ultimately still belongs to the establishment and is a big part of the government around him. All the people that have been put around him are members of the establishment, and the same members of the establishment that have been antagonizing war with Russia for now about 9 years. It seems like ever since the Georgia-Russia war that there's been a bit of tenseness between the Russia and the United States, and there was actually somewhat. I would actually say it's really been, the height of the tensions in the last 5 years. It's been kind of a renewed Cold War that started ever since really there was that meeting back in 2012, and then things started to get cold. And Putin stopped playing games. When Putin came back to office in 2012, he had a vision. His vision was for total sovereignty for Russia. And Putin did a major thing back in 2006 in his first time as being president when he got the Rothschilds to leave Russia. But he took it a step further even and actually pushed, for their territorial allies and whatnot, and Russia to actually, really defend itself. And Medvedev, he kind of fell a little bit weak on some negotiations. Putin did not go weak on any negotiations. He stood firm. And you see that in, for example, the North Korea situation, in Syria. For example, that there's been all this pressure on Russia to, ditch their alliance in North Korea. Well, it's still kind of there. I mean, they definitely haven't became enemies. And in Syria, their alliance, of course, is still very strong, and Russia hasn't asked Assad to leave, nothing like that. They plan on Assad staying, which is totally different than what the West wants, which is for Assad to leave. They don't want Assad to stay. They even though that the Syrian people voted 88% for him back in 2014, they are going to they're gonna keep saying that Assad should go. And as well, people in the Trump administration, you got your, Tillerson, Trump, Pence, who else is in there? DeVos, all these people again. Like I said, is that Trump's still going to continue. I think that there's still, Trump might be able to say some good words here and there, but he still hasn't, done the major steps in order to alleviate the tensions between Russia and the United States. And one of the major things he could do is lift the sanctions, which he's talked about that he'll lift the sanctions maybe as part of a condition of something that he's going to make them sign. Well, that's, what that is pretty much holding a gun to their head and saying that if you want me to take away this gun, well, you're gonna have to sign this paper, or the gun's already been there. The sanctions have been there for a while, and it's a very crippling thing, sanctions. And anybody that's trying to improve the relations between a country and the other country would be lifting the sanctions. And another thing that Trump would be doing is a immediate reversal of the policy in Syria, and that includes stop funding the Syrian rebels totally, pull out any soldiers there, and if they do keep soldiers there, they're in aid of Assad, and working with Russia to keep Assad as president. Or at least work, because Assad is ultimately the main fighter of ISIS in Syria. He's the main one that's combating ISIS in Syria. So, it would be sensible to work with Assad in order with your fight for ISIS, or your fight against ISIS. They've been funding ISIS for a while now, and it's still continuing, along with Israel, Turkey, your Gulf states. They've been doing this, and Trump hasn't made it. This would be one of the first things he would do is to reverse the policy in Syria And I think that there is no real, certain future for Syria if Assad's not there, because the people that are against Assad are extremists. And we had recently Tulsi Gabbard go over there, and she pretty much said this, which is pretty surprising that a person in Congress would say these things, because that, of course, that's going to piss off the establishment. And Tulsi Gabbard, though, I know she confirmed her support for Israel, which is odd. How can you support Israel but support Assad? Because Israel is funding the Zionist-backed death squads inside of Syria that are going after Assad. It seems very contradictory, but it seems like that's a lot of times the words of politicians. It's like with Trump, is that Trump talks about the good relations with Russia, but at the same time wants to alienate. At the same time, wants to alienate all these countries. Trump at the same time wants to alienate all these countries that are allied with Russia. Another thing that contradicts that is that why would he put Pence as vice president? Someone that I definitely wouldn't say is pro-Russia. So you have these major contradictions. In the whole, right now there's a lot of people, even in the truther community, that are talking so highly of Donald Trump. And thinking that Donald Trump's going to lift us out of a lot of our woes and problems that America's been in. And, really, they think he's going to stand up to the Federal Reserve like JFK did, which would be the ultimate thing, because the bankers control the United States via the Federal Reserve. They control the printing of the currency of the United States. JFK tried to get rid of that, and he was assassinated for it. Donald Trump, they believe that he's actually going to do that. He's going to stand up to the Fed. And I think that at this point, if he was actually for that, they would have not allowed him to get to this point. They could have easily put in anybody else in the primaries. Instead of Trump, they could have put in Cruz or whatnot. But Trump was the one they picked. And they allowed to get the nomination and become the president. He was selected. Remember, presidents are not elected, they're selected. And even FDR said that. And people believe that this is a real democracy, when a lot of the world thinks of our democracy as a joke, and there's many reasons for that. And it's very not representative of the people of the United States, because, if you look at the people of the United States, they don't even support the Democrat or Republican parties. People in the United States are sick of this two-party system. And if it was really the voice of the people was expressed, the Democrats and Republicans would not be there. Also, another thing is I think that the economic system wouldn't be the same. Is that Americans, they don't support corporatism, they don't support corporate welfare, they don't support corporations rigging the economy in their favor. And I think that more Americans support either a, laissez-faire, total non-regulated capitalist economy, or they support some kind of hybrid people's dictated economy with free market principles involved, some kind of system like that. I think that that's what the Americans more want. I don't think Americans support corporatism, and maybe the corporate elite does, but talk about the majority of Americans, not what 0.1% wants. The majority of Americans, I don't think, want that. They want something different. And you see the talk right now that the millennials, a lot of them are, but is that they think that what we're living in now is capitalism, which, capitalism isn't a great system, but capitalism is not what we're living in. We're living in corporatism. It's a economic system that exists in fascism. And you can call it fascist economics, where a corporation and the state squash the competition. And that is why we're in a lot of the shit that we're in here, is because the corporatist system. Apparently a lot of the millennials, though, favor socialism. And I really do question what socialism they favor, because they talk about supporting Bernie Sanders, who was outed as being a Zionist and being and also being for war with Iran. I mean, that's how he talked like. He didn't seem to be any different was his stance on Iran than the other ones. So, um, Bernie Sanders. Bernie Sanders didn't seem to be any different than the other people in the establishment, and they fell for that because he said he was a socialist. So if that's what they think a socialist is, then they're pretty much just continuing for the establishment games. Uh, you know, I don't think they're, for example, they're not supporting Hugo Chavez, they're not supporting Joseph Tito or that kind of thing, like some kind of, what I would envision would be maybe the best thing for the United States is a nationalization of our on a lot of our a nationalization of resources, our a worker dominated economy, and but at the same time, allowing small businesses to bloom. I think that the idea, in general, I think the idea of private property has to definitely exist in the whatever future system, but at the same time, you don't allow corporations to buy out, 2 counties worth of land or anything like that. Another thing that I think would be highly beneficial would be some kind of would be making some kind of social programs using the revenues from the nationalized resources. I mean, we have some gigantic resources that could definitely garner a lot of profit when nationalized. People say, well, there wouldn't be too much profit in it once it's nationalized, but I think some of the South America models kind of shown that to not be true, and people will say, well, Venezuela is in such a terrible mess right now, but they've been sanctioned, and also the oil prices have went way down. There's many reasons why the problems are happening inside of Venezuela now, but it's not the nationalization of the resources. In fact, they were doing better than they had in a long time when they nationalized oil, and by early 2010s, they were doing pretty well. But I think nationalization of resources would be very beneficial in the United States. Our oil, we have a decent oil industry. Alaska, we have, and at the same time, I think we should be moving towards renewable energy. Just the fact that oil is damaging to the economy. At the same time, it's not sustainable. We can't be using oil forever. But I think I do question, though. I do question the motive when the UN and stuff being the ones that seems to be the ones that are spearheading these environmental measures, because I know that the UN ain't up to any good. So, I think agreements like that are more like to set some kind of carbon tax and to get more like a measure of control to get people abiding by regulations set by a worldwide body. And I'm not saying, that, for example, right here, that global warming is a hoax or whatnot, but I do question the motives of some of the people that, have been really pushing the, in the UN and whatnot, been pushing these measures to stop global warming. Or climate change is what they call it nowadays. It's global warming is not really the term they use for it anymore, because even though it's a steady warming of the environment, but instead of using their new term, we'll just use the term that's been used for a long time, which is global warming. And going on into the show, we're talking about the wars that have been fought over oil, gold, banking, and we've been this government has gotten a lot of Americans killed over oil over there in Iraq, and that's another thing. Is that if we were to nationalize our oil, imagine is that there would be no more excuse for that. Is we need this for the oil? It's like, do you want our price, our price of oil to go up to $6 a gallon? All that kind of stuff that you hear. That a lot of people that are supporters of the war, but they use a lot of times they say they're supporters of the troops. If you support the troops, then you wouldn't support them to go die in meaningless wars in the first place. It's sickening to hear these people say that they support the troops, but at the same time supporting the wars that get these troops killed, get these troops coming back in wheelchairs, getting these troops coming back, not all there mentally because they've seen horrible stuff. And then we celebrate these troops that help do the bidding of these bankers by doing horrific stuff, like Chris Kyle. And I see people still saying that Chris Kyle was a hero. And you look at his book, and the book is the writing of a man that supported genocide. I mean, this guy killed 100-something people, and not all of them were combatants. And it seems like it goes back to the loose term of combatant at all times. It comes back to like when they talk about over there in Israel, they'll say that they kill combatants over in Palestine, but a combatant just happens to be a man the age of 12 to 65, and Chris Kyle, he talks about that not every one of the people that he killed was a combatant, and at the same time, he seems to be supportive of what he did. He didn't seem to be, remorseful, thinking, well, I killed these innocent people. It's horrible. No, he was thinking more along the lines that, he thinks that, it's almost like he had to do what he had to do. And Chris Kyle is just one example of this new, warmonger culture that they are getting Americans to abide by. And it's the neocons have really pushed that amongst Americans. The neocons and the neocons and the bankers who've been pushing these wars and eliminating countries that don't have a Rothschild bank. And you see also other motives, the opium trade, heroin. You have heroin production has went up 5,000% ever since the war started in Afghanistan. This is something that they wasn't too much of a problem 15 years ago. Is now a huge problem in Afghanistan. Afghanistan, there's problems inside our countries, but also it goes to, in Europe and inside the United States, we have a huge heroin epidemic. It's partially because of Big Pharma and them pushing these pills that were synthetic heroin, and now people can't get those pills anymore. So now they're turning to heroin, and they're just like going from the synthetic version to the street version, and it's horrible. People die all the time from heroin overdose in this country. People have their lives totally changed by heroin in this country, and we have this giant drug problem inside the United States. And this goes to something I was hearing from some people inside the Trump cabinet. Were talking this morning, or I don't know if Chris Christie is he technically in the Trump cabinet, but they were talking this morning about how we are the most moral country in the world or whatnot. That we're like a moral example the whole world should abide by. A whole world should look at us and want to be like us. But at the same time, talking about maybe our culture and what our values, as the average American represents. Yes, there's a lot of things that we can look very highly upon. But when it comes to our laws, when it comes to our government, when it comes to, our culture, it's not something that the whole world should be looking up to. And, for example, the things that are culture by the warmonger culture and this increasingly jingoistic culture that we're living in that seems to cheer on wars as they happen, not protest. Like what happened in World War I, that the war was marked by a lot of protest when we got into the first war that we didn't have much a part in. People were very upset about it. But nowadays, people cheer on these the next war, it seems like. And one of the major things that I could think of that it seems that it's changed in recent years. Also, is that before they used to have to draft people to go to these wars in Vietnam or whatnot because people didn't want to go to them, and they had people protested on the streets inside of the United States, and people demanded for the end of the war. This is before the internet. They didn't have nearly quite the knowledge that people have of the Iraq War or what they can get of the Iraq War via websites of WikiLeaks or whatnot. But via the limited resources back then, they found out what the United States government was involved in Vietnam, and they protested. They shouted. They were angry. And we had all this protest, and we had the protest for civil rights in the 1960s. We had all these different people protesting, their voices wanting to be heard. And all with limited resources. Imagine if the internet existed back then. What kind of change could have happened around the years of 1965 to 1975? But what happened is that the same people, unfortunately, their radical nature faded out. And eventually those people got duped by politicians that acted like they were going to bring change. Politicians that ultimately ended up being more the establishment. You look at all that change that could have happened. And also one of the major things, the Black Panther movement, the FBI tore apart. They tore apart the Black Panther movement, but they didn't tear apart the KKK and white nationalist groups. That and you notice is that our government has no problem with racists and race baiters because these people cause a division amongst the working class of this country. But they do have a problem with people like the Black Panthers that tried to unite the people, the working class of America, against the government. It wasn't just a black group. They had white, Latin, Asian members. It's like everyone was allowed to be in there. And they had like sister groups that were of different races. The Black Panther Party was considered at one point by the FBI to be the biggest threat to the United States government. And inside of the United States, it was gaining in popularity. But they tore it apart and they used COINTELPRO agents in order to infiltrate the movement. And a lot of them were arrested on suspicious claims. And a lot of them ended up killed. And you had, for example, Sasta Shakur, who ended up, she eventually found asylum in Cuba. That's one of the things I could talk about. Was one of Fidel Castro's great things he did was show his support to the Black Panthers. And Black Panthers were not a violent militant group, as that they were wanting to inflict harm on people, regular people that had nothing to do with what the establishment was doing, and what their sole intentions were. And, I said that like they wanted to inflict harm on anybody. Is that they didn't want to. I don't think their goal was to inflict harm on anybody, and I don't think they wanted to take out the government by violent means. They would rather have had the government fall via the mass movement in a peaceful way. But the Black Panthers also were prepared to be armed in case that the government would not go down peacefully. And that's the thing is that all these protesters that go out to these protests with very dangerous people that they're facing, the opposition, being the government or private mercenaries or whatnot that are armed and will use their weapons. I see at Standing Rock or whatnot is that they have these private mercenaries that don't really seem to have much of a resistance to opening fire or whatnot on peaceful protesters. And these people Standing Rock, I think that they need to be a little careful. But at the same time, I think that the people of Standing Rock, they've done a very good job of keeping the pipeline not going so far. And when a lot of people are going to say, well, Standing Rock is a useless protest because there's already so many pipelines and that we need to have energy independence. But however, these are the same people, a lot of these same people that seem to not care about energy independence when they'll still support the wars for oil overseas, but nevertheless about the Hippocratic statements that some of these people of the pro pipeline people are, is that this pipeline doesn't need to go through Native American burial grounds and their water supply. That's not necessary. They could make a pipeline somewhere else. And I'm not the biggest proponent for to be building tons of oil pipelines inside the United States. What I think is what I'm a big proponent of is nationalization of our oil industry inside the United States. No more corporations profiting off of it, but rather people receiving it back to the social programs, putting the money in for building up Detroit's infrastructure, using the profits from our oil industry. That's what I'm more a proponent of, and honestly, I would have to see what the input of our oil industry is of now in order to judge what's if it needs to be expanded or whatnot. If I ever had any kind of say in what would be the next step once it's already nationalized, we need to expand in order to, meet some of our goals, our social program goals or whatnot. But I'm gonna say no. Actually, I'm just gonna say there would be no more pipelines. We'd be working towards renewable energy and safer ways of, that would be our way of energy independence. And we could also nationalize other industries. For example, one of the major things is that the food industries, that could be, turned into work towards the people owning, these gigantic farms owned by these giant corporations, and busting up some of these giant corporations, giving some of that farming land back to the people, and having the people, also get the benefits of our giant food industry that we have in this country. That we grow more food, I think we produce more food than any other country on the planet. So there'd be a ton of money in that. But yet, we seem to not be able to give our own people food that's not garbage. That'd be another thing that would work on, is that the people of the United States would eat healthy, because we would stop giving away our good food to other countries while exporting bad food. And at the same time, growing our own food, we tend to give our people GMO food, or as I say, the United States government, we give our people GMO food, but I would eliminate GMOs. It would be healthy food without GMOs. And they're seeing the experiments where they've been able to grow just like any other, just like people that use GMOs, the same without the GMOs. You could still grow giant quantities of the same foods without GMOs. And I saw like experiments like that, done in Russia or whatnot, where they, have broke records or whatnot, without using genetically modified products, and many other examples. I'm pretty sure that you could see that they probably have grown similar amounts without using GMOs. But with the going back to what I was talking about, with Standing Rock and whatnot, and trying to remember what I was talking about before this. The Standing Rock, kind of lost my train of thought there. Kind of went off on a tangent. Remember I was saying something about is that I was talking about what these people that are proponents of the Standing Rock said, and I remember saying something about that before, is about nonviolent versus violent protests. And is that Black Panthers, they wanted to see a peaceful elimination of our government, and at the same time is that but they protected themselves. And the Black Panther movement now has been kind of eliminated down to just a few names that we hear about. South Shakur being a political prisoner. We had like Greg Dollar of Cuba. Another one would be Lamia. What's his last name? I can't think of his last name. Abu Jabal or whatnot. He wasn't released in the recent pardonings, he's still in prison and his health is faltering. So that's another big one right there. We have a lot of these political prisoners, and some of these people, like Black Panthers, that have been in prison for the last 30, 40 years for stuff that they were framed. There was a lot of that kind of stuff that they were framed for attacks that happened many years ago, but because of the lack of evidence or whatnot, and the fact is that the police covered up a lot of the evidence, they didn't have much of a case. So that's how one was that is that and that's happened many times where they framed people or whatnot and put them on trumped up charges and were able to throw. They've thrown away. This country has political prisoners. This country has many political prisoners, and this is a country that talks all the time about about how they're different from dictatorships to have political prisoners or whatnot. And Standing Rock, I mean, I'm sure there's been some people that have been locked up for their activism over there, and what have they done? Because they were protecting the water of these Native American people, that they are going to get thrown in. They're gonna get thrown in jail for that, just like these people, Black Panthers, they did nothing. Did nothing. They were just a lot of times they would have. A lot of times they were 100% peaceful. I'd say there probably were some violent Black Panthers that did some acts, but I think that the vast majority of them were peaceful, and they carried arms. But again, just because you carry a gun, protection doesn't make you not peaceful. In fact, it's a lot of times it's a way that a lot of conflict doesn't break out. Is when they're secure and they're protected. When people are secure and protected, I think people might think twice before starting anything, and that's why a lot of times you look at like towns that have a lot of gun ownership and they have less violent crime. Standing Rock, you don't see a lot of the. That's one thing you don't see. Things like armed protesters or whatnot, and I know it's completely to keep the look of being a peaceful movement, which I agree with that. And I think that's what is attract a lot of attention, is that people see these unarmed protesters being treated like terrorists or something for defending these Native Americans' water. And the Black Panthers, I think part of the reason why they had a bad rap was partially because they were carrying the arms and they made themselves look militant, but it was to protect themselves. And people understand that. People can if people can look back at that history and look at it that way. That's what the Black Panthers was formed. It was formed as a protection unit because they knew that the police wouldn't protect them in a lot of these places. To protect themselves from, the KKK and these other right-wing extremist groups or whatnot that are in the South. The KKK being really they were, their prominence dropped off in the 70s and 80s, but you see that in some ways is that they've kind of made somewhat of a comeback. I would say, definitely in different names. You got people like Richard Spencer, whatnot, that seems to have gained a lot of support, and it almost seems like a parody of a movement. Richard Spencer, whatnot, and his little group of followers. They talk about Hail Trump and stuff like that, and victory to the white race, and all that kind of stuff like that. But at the same time, when one of them gets punched or whatnot on the streets, people are questioning whether that's okay or not. When you hear some of the calls that some of the stuff that Richard Spencer's talked about, it seems like there's somewhat of a disconnect, and it's like they must not think, because if this would have been some guy that was just 30 years ago or something like that, I think they would have supported the hell out of what they a lot of people see the Nazi getting punched. I don't know, maybe the memory of World War II is kind of fading away or whatnot, but again, I think that this whole alt-right thing is one other thing that's being played up by the media in order to, uh, make another dangerous group of individuals. Is that people tell people to look out for this alt-right. And again, it's that the talk about and going back to what. But anyways, getting a little bit sidetracked. Black Panthers were protecting themselves though from right-wing extremists and the KKK, which at the time had in the 60s there was definitely a prominence, and they kind of had a resurgence from their time in the 20s or whatnot, when they were really known for they felt like a few waves. If they had the first wave, which was kind of right after the Civil War, and then they had the wave of the 20s and the 30s, and then they had the wave of the 60s or whatnot. And the police in a lot of those towns that didn't prevent blacks from being targeted by the KKK. And I think a lot of times the cops were part of the KKK. Part of the reason why they wore hoods is because they ended up at the back in the morning being doctors, lawyers, police, and just other normal people. But at night they ended up targeting minorities and doing acts of terror in order to influence people into their ideology, I guess, or whatnot, which is fear and dominance for the what they saw, the white supremacist power structure, which I guess they were seeking to protect. Which I would say, people call it that. People say that's a white supremacist power structure, but it's ultimately, I would say it's the people at the top are racist, but they don't care about the white man more than they care about the black man. They don't care about either, the commoner. They care about dividing these people. They care about dividing the working class. That's their intentions. Their intentions are definitely are that. It's to divide and then conquer. And they know that a divided working class is much weaker than a united working class. And you see some examples of a united working class getting together, and one of the best examples I could think of in the recent history of the working class getting together in order to demand, I would say, well, the working class, they didn't really demand change, but they did. So they stopped, the counter revolution inside of Venezuela when the coup happened, and like 1 million of Chavez's supporters came out to defend Chavez and to reverse the coup, and it pretty much, it made the people, the coup plotters, flee. That was an example of the working class working together towards victory. And this has happened a few times in recent history, and it definitely, people think that us protesting, us talk on the radio, us spreading information is all worthless and it doesn't have any value or whatnot. But don't let people tell you that, because obviously there's been some victories. Some of the victories included, for example, when in '98 was to bring about Hugo Chavez, and the Venezuelan people that 10 years prior would have thought they were never going to be able to eliminate the corrupt right-wing regime of Carlos Indefrez, ended up with Hugo Chavez. And they were able to, really push forward, and the poverty was reduced. No matter what people say, and you hear all these people are talking shit about Venezuela nowadays, that they were able to drop their poverty by the second most in the region. The people of Venezuela also, were able to enjoy free health care, free higher education, free, well, not, free, but subsidized food, and people that used to go hungry were no longer going hungry. Abstract poverty was heavily reduced, and illiteracy was heavily reduced. The with the Bolivian missions that Chavez funded a lot with the oil industry, he was able to dramatically change the lives of Venezuelans. And this seems to be something that they are not really, they don't really talk about on the mainstream media, is the Bolivian missions and these many things that have definitely changed the lives of Venezuelans. And is that Venezuela might not have the same standard of living as Russia, or maybe the same standard of living as Iceland or something, but they have a very high standard of living because Venezuela, or compared to where they were before, and compared to some of their neighbors, Colombia, right now, with 8 times inflation on their food prices as of recently, are really suffering and are really struggling. I would say that this country, Colombia, I would say they're struggling worse than Venezuela is with this recent oil drought. And this is a country with a totally different economic system, so they're not comparable. Between what they have with Maduro over in Venezuela and what they have with Santos in Colombia. I think some of the people in the right-wing circles might like to try to compare. I'm trying to say that Santos is somehow lenient towards the left wing inside of South America. But Santos has been one of the people that's been heavily forced sabotage against the Venezuelan government, and has also not brought the people of the paramilitaries to justice. And also, Mission Robinson was the one that with the literacy, the Bolivian mission of literacy inside of Venezuela in the 2000s. In 2003, Hugo Chavez implemented it, and it was adopted in the name of, in the exile of this Venezuelan philosopher Simon Rodriguez, who was in exile from Spanish America. He adopted that pseudonym. He adopted that name, so it's what they named after him. And it taught reading, writing, arithmetic to Venezuelans who were illiterate. The program is military civilian in nature and sends soldiers to, among other places, remote and dangerous locales in order to reach the most undereducated, neglected, and marginalized adult citizens to give them regular schooling and lessons. So, it was reached out even to the people way out in the country. It wasn't just, people that were somewhat close to cities. It was people way out that were able to receive help from the Bolivian missions. And that was the goal. It was social justice, social welfare, anti-poverty, educational, and it was also somewhat, I guess, they say the Bolivia is military recruiting. And what's the it reminds me that talk about the the right wing instead of Colombia, and what their talking points is that the people inside of Colombia, the people are right now pretty upset about the Santos government, but hopefully they don't look to a right wing alternative to replace that. And with people like Uribe or whatnot, that that Santos is a former apprentice of Uribe. Uribe might use that rhetoric that Santos is too left wing, and now we need somebody even more right wing in order to fix Colombia. And I see that with like the thing like the peace deal with the FARC, and also with the somewhat of an easement, I guess, of the relationship with Venezuela, or at least on paper. Is that the fact is that Colombia and Venezuela don't seem to be as at each other's throats as during the time of Uribe, but they are. I mean, in different ways. You see in 2013 the tensions got very hot with Santos and at the same time Maduro, who are still the presidents of their respective countries. So soon, both those guys will probably be no longer in power soon. It's going to probably be whoever wins in 2018 in Colombia versus whoever succeeds Maduro in Venezuela. I could highly imagine that the Maduro probably won't run again in 2018 because there was an unpopularity over there, and the people of Venezuela are seem to be kind of angry. They've taken some of their anger out a little bit on Maduro, as he some of the reasons why the things are happening to him now to be his fault. But it's again more of a wider scope. It's the sanctions. It's the attention being put on them by the United States. And yes, a little bit of it is, you could say, Maduro's incompetency, as I don't think that he was really fit to be the leader of Venezuela. But I think that now potentially Diosdado Cabellos is who they're going to look to run in 2018. And Colombia, the candidates, there's one guy, German Vargas, who belongs to what you could say is the establishment. There's possibly Zalunga is another person that could run again. He was the one who ran 2014 against Santos and lost. And then also potentially you have the prospect of Robledo, who is a left-wing candidate that is more in favor of Venezuela and is also for dramatically changes in the economic system inside of Colombia. Robledo wins, you can imagine some dramatic changes. And he's considered to be someone that's in the race, as one of the main people that could win. Last time his party got about 15% of the vote when it was Clara Lopez that ran in 2014 during the 2014 presidential elections. This time it's Jorge Robledo. They're going to be their candidate for the Polo Party. Be interesting to see how that unfolds. But I think that what's more dangerous is to look at just the whole establishment as a whole. To look at just the right wing inside the country, and how the right wing have been able to paint out the situation. But let's look at, is that the fact is that even if, for example, if it's not Uribe's direct party, let's say that somebody, like Santos, another Santos type character gets in, it's still the establishment winning again. And in the past, it's the problem with Colombian politics, is that they believe in this false idea that the next president's going to be different, even though that there's just more of it's more establishment candidates winning. They have almost every party is now aligned with the Santos government, so it's going to be hard for Robledo to win. But Robledo being in the one party is not aligned with the Santos government. Santos, well, noticing, looking at the last few years, is that I don't think that the people don't really believe too much the lies of Uribe, and I think that Uribe is starting to get he seems to be losing fame, and I think that Uribe, even though that they try to paint him in the media or whatnot to be like a hero for Colombia, and that he's the man that kind of brought law and order back to Colombia, something that a lot of times fascists like to claim is that they're the person that brought law and order back to the country. And Uribe, now starting to be implicated in paramilitary scandals or whatnot. I don't think that that sect of the politics is as popular as it was before. But Santos, again, is the dangerous prospect is not the right wing sect really winning, but is the establishment as a whole winning. Because if anybody in the establishment wins, and that's still, people are going to still be blinded by that illusion, and still a lot of the same shit's going to go on. And by saying a lot of the same shit that's going to go on, it's going to be all of them going to go on, including the paramilitaries, and the paramilitaries' collaboration with the government of Colombia in order to eliminate dissent and whatnot. The paramilitaries often do the dirty work that the Colombian government doesn't want to do. It's like in Mexico, the drug cartels do the dirty work that the Mexican government doesn't want to do, and that seems to be somewhat the case over in a lot of the Latin countries, that they have like these criminal organizations that the government uses instead of themselves in order to eliminate dissent. And, how does this all tie back into the war machine in the United States? Is that I could see that potentially the United States invading Cuba or Venezuela with Donald Trump and his rhetoric that he talks about these countries and the way he does. I see Donald Trump, potentially using that as something to something as a potential trophy that he could take, is being the one that eliminated Raul Castro, or being the one that eliminated Nicolas Maduro's tyrannical government. That's how he's going to say it. If he was the one to do that, he would definitely gain a lot of support, and at the same time, I think he would be able to, really rally maybe some of the jingoistic nature that he's trying to instill inside the American people. And really, I shouldn't say he, it's more them as the bankers, but they're using him as a speaker. They're using him as a cheerleader in order to get people supportive of this. That's what he seems to have been throughout a lot of the election. He's been rallying, the nationalistic or false nationalistic fervor of the American people. And it's false nationalism, because what he's supporting is not stuff that would support the American people, but what it would support is big business interest, foreign interest, and the United States government. And the foreign interest, you see that he talks about his strong relationship with Israel he wants to create, and he talks about America first. Well, we already have put America second to Israel, it seems, was the way that we have catered to them. How could you talk about America first but still have an even stronger relationship with Israel? And also wants to continue the relationship with Saudi Arabia. The Americans have definitely been not put first, and Trump's not going to put them first. Trump is going to continue the games of the establishment. And you look at Yemen. There's already been drone strikes by the United States government inside of Yemen. There's already been continuation of the Obama administration's drone strikes there. And inside of Syria, there's still heavy fighting going on inside of Syria. And again, you don't hear this policy reversal that should happen if Donald Trump was the real deal. What you do hear is the talk of you have the talk of what sounds like creating a regional war inside the Middle East when he talks about war with Iran. And what would be one way to get into a war with Iran would be through war in Syria, which I see to be heavily likely. And I think that the possibility, when you continue to do the policies of the Obama administration and continue to support the same and continue to support the same things that continue the tensions over there inside of Syria, it's going to potentially lead to and blow up to something regional, something much more serious, something that could involve Iran, could involve Yemen, and also Israel, of course, would probably tail behind the United States in such an event. and I don't think they're going to be the ones that are going to be leading it. And I don't think that they're going to be that they're waiting for the United States to come in, and because they know that they probably can't handle they probably can't handle a war with Iran by themselves. These people inside, these people right now that are, rally on this, tensions with Iran, and right now that they've also been put on the no travel list, which, Iran, a country that doesn't have terror sympathizers as a country, besides the ones that the United States supports, and I also know a country that does not have people that have committed acts against Americans are been put on the travel list, but they didn't put Saudi Arabia on the travel list. That Saudi Arabia has put more has had more sympathizers on Twitter than any other country to ISIS. And also, another thing that should be noted about Saudi Arabia is that they're the ones that pretty much lead the ideological battle against, they're the ones that are putting out the propaganda that a lot of these terrorists are influenced by. They have the Wahhabist clerics. Wahhabism is out of Saudi Arabia, but they weren't put on the travel ban. So if this man is really about fighting terrorism, he would put on Saudi Arabia on the list. But, he puts Iran on the list. He puts Iraq on the list, which that one does make sense. Syria does make sense. But Iran makes no sense to be put on the list. On Saudi Arabia not to be put on the list. Of the 7 countries. I can see why he would put volatile countries. And why he would put countries that are, currently have big problems with terrorism. But the put Iran absolutely makes no sense. And also put, and I see he picked Somalia and he picked the Sudan. He picked, some countries that were heavily troubled is what he's going to say. And that that we can't really vet the people coming from, because that's what a lot of what he's been talking about is that we need a way to more properly vet these incoming refugees or whatnot, and incoming people from these countries to know that they're not terrorists. But what I have to say to that is that Trump obviously missed a major mark with the Saudi Arabia not being put on there, and also like Qatar and other countries, I'm pretty sure have a lot of terrorists inside of them, and a lot of people of questionable ideological background. Qatar's known to be supportive of the Syrian rebels and be in support of more extreme versions of the Syrian rebels. For example, the United States doesn't openly admit to supporting the extremist elements of the Syrian rebels, but Qatar does. And Qatar, just pretty much one step short of supporting ISIS. I'm not sure if they support al-Nusra openly. I think they do. Qatar is very extremist, the government, and we didn't put them on the travel list. We don't put anybody on, we didn't. The United States government did not put. Didn't put a lot of the countries, that are really troublesome countries. We talk about Sudan, Bahrain, and I'm pretty sure there's been some terrorists have operated out of the United Arab Emirates. Again, the travel ban doesn't have much rhyme or reason behind it, but it's really just a thing to show off a future discriminatory policy. But at the same time, it also is to antagonize Iran. And also, Qatar was, remember, Al Jazeera, didn't they have someone with a pro-terrorist slant back in the days? And Qatar is the ones where they came out of. Anyways, it should be noted that Al Jazeera is still pro-terrorist this day, especially through their Arabic network. Al Jazeera supports the Syrian rebels and they support and they support the Salafists in their destabilization of the Middle East. And they have their AJ Plus that is pro-Palestinian, but they support the Zionist-backed death squads in Syria. And I think that it is to trick Palestinians into fighting for these Salafist groups, and they thinking that somehow that they're fighting some kind of war that benefits the Palestinians by removing Assad, which I think is this idea that from the Palestinians that they believe Assad is somehow a Zionist or something like that, which is complete bullshit. Assad's been fighting the Zionists for his entire career. His father fought the Zionists for his entire career, but for some reason they are seen as a that he's seen as a Zionist. I saw, I don't know. I don't know if he, I say his entire career. I don't know what he was doing in the early years, but I know for his entire time as president, yes, he was. Or at least most of the time. Looking at the Qatari government, Tamim bin Hamad Al Thani, that's the emir of Qatar, and also that should be noted that Qatar is not a democracy. They have a monarchy. They're not a democracy by any means, and just look it up on Wikipedia. Very simply, that they're a monarchy, and you look up the reality on some alternative media or whatnot, and you see the reality of the repressive regime there. They're highly reliant on oil money. Big corporations like Shell, Exxon get a lot of money from that country. They have the world's third largest natural gas reserves and oil reserves. The country has the highest per capita income in the world. Qatar, the UN says, of course, some favorable things about Qatar, saying that they have a very high human development, and they said the most advanced Arab state for that. But it's not saying much, though, because Syria was, for a long time, I would say, would have been the nicest. I would say was the nicest Arab state, but then they got the rebels unleashed on them, and during, of course, the notes they're supporting the rebel groups during the Arab Spring and through Al Jazeera, and the globally expanding media group Al Jazeera. Also, Sharia law is in practice inside Qatar. That's another thing that should be noted. And it is said that inside of Qatar, that a female's testimony is worth half a man's, and they have a codified family law that was introduced in 2006. Polygamy is allowed in the country. Flogging is used in Qatar as a punishment for alcohol consumption or illicit sexual relations. In 2006, a Filipino woman was sentenced to 100 lashes for adultery. In 2010, at least 18 people, mostly foreign nationals, are sentenced to flogging for between 40 and 100 lashes for offenses related to illicit sexual relations or alcohol consumption. And it goes on, I guess it's continued for a few years. And the saying that's part of their interpretation of Sharia law is why they have a woman's testimony is worth half a man's. It doesn't really have to do with for example, it's a lot fairer over in Iran, their implementation of Sharia law, but in Qatar it's pretty primitive. It's sort of like Saudi Arabia's. Also, I think in Qatar you can't drink alcohol if you're a Muslim, but I think I don't know how they really prove that. That if you're it's illegal if you're Muslim, but if you're Christian, you can. I don't know or whatnot. And I find it weird that they get the World Cup in 2022 despite all these accusations, and at the same time that Qatar doesn't even really have that much of a history of soccer. but yet they're going to host the ultimate soccer event in just 5 years, in cities that haven't even been built yet. It's really a whole bizarre situation. The whole World Cup going to Qatar, and I think it should have went to a country that more. But again, what I don't like about the whole event is that the fact is that how much money is used oftentimes of tax money in these countries, like what happened in Brazil, that apparently some priorities were not exactly kept straight. I don't know how true that was, or if that was something to, may potentially undermine the leftist government inside of Brazil. But they said that some of the social functions were not being met, and were being neglected in favor of the World Cup, and making sure that everything went well for the World Cup. I don't know how true that is. If social were not being if social functions were not being kept up for the World Cup, but then again, it goes back to saying is that Qatar. I haven't heard Trump say anything about Qatar yet. Qatar is a very backwards country, and I'm pretty sure he has business interest over Qatar. And it goes back to saying is that talk about what the United States military machine has been involved with inside of Russia or inside of the Ukraine also is that they've also been in Ukraine they've been involved in I believe that they have the paratroopers or whatnot have been like training the Ukrainians. They have the United States has brought also mercenaries over there to Ukraine, and they seem to be definitely building up for something. I don't know how big the fireworks they want, but it's getting tense again over there in Ukraine, and they're fighting again in East Ukraine. The West Ukrainian forces are fighting with East Ukrainian forces, and for a little background on the situation, in 2014, a coup happened, eliminating the previous government, bringing about the Euromaidan government. The Euromaidan government's been significant for persecuting Russians. They want to eliminate Russian as a spoken language there. Another thing is that they have taken a very hawkish stance against Russia, and at the same time have brought in another hawk that started the war with Russia, Saakashvili, who's now inside the government of Ukraine. Petro Poroshenko, a billionaire oligarch, took the power of Ukraine in 2014, and the Crimea voted to leave Ukraine prior to Petro Poroshenko's arrival to the presidency, and right after the coup happened in March of 2014, and they voted by 96.6% to leave Ukraine and join Russia, a vote that, of course, the West said was fraudulent, despite the fact that 96.6% of the people voted for it. The eastern regions of the country started wanting to separate. Rebels started claiming independence out of Lugansk and Donetsk, which are de facto independent from the West Ukrainian regime, and larger parts of the country started separating, or there's fighting, are now contested. And pretty much the eastern region of the country wants to leave, and that's why I call them East Ukraine. And then you have West Ukraine out of Kiev that is trying to keep control of the country. They say that not only does the entire area on Donbass belong to Ukraine, but Crimea as well, even though that Russia controls it. Russia has controlled it now for almost 3 years. I don't think that the people of Crimea definitely wants to return to Ukraine. I don't think that the people of the people of the country, the people of East Ukraine want to stay in Russia or want to stay in Ukraine. I think that the people of Russia would definitely welcome the East Ukrainian regions to join Russia, and because they see what's going on over there, how they're persecuting a lot of these people are ethnic Russians, and inside of Donbass, it's getting hotter, and already like 10,000 people have perished in this war, and this is a war in Europe, and you don't hear too much about it. You think that how much they cover about other events inside of Europe, for example, the Belgium terrorist attack, the French terrorist attack, we would hear a ton about what's going on inside of Ukraine, but we don't. This war that's going on there has left many refugees. There's refugees coming from Ukraine, and you don't hear too much about those refugees. I think that's a really inconvenient fact to the Americans that, and I said the American government, that the American government has caused these refugees by supporting the West Ukrainian regime, and they brought about this regime in the first place. The regime would never have been there without the United States government and them back in the coup. And again, they meddled with affairs of a country once again, just like they did in Chile, just like they did in Bolivia, just like they did in Ecuador, just like they did in so many South American countries in the past. Let's look at some of the forces that are inside of the East Ukraine. You have your different groups. You have the Donbass People's Militia, Vostok Brigade, Russian Orthodox Army, Sparta Battalion, Luhansk People's Militia, Great Don Army, Prizak Brigade, Rapid Response Batman Group. Though I think that the Batman Group might have disbanded. I think. Let me see. But it's kind of a loose coalition of forces inside of there, and there's Great Don Army. They're kind of like the Don Cossacks I talked about that fought the Bolsheviks during the Russian Civil War. Well, Great Don Army is here inside fighting against West Ukrainians, and you also have you got your bigger groups, also your Russian Orthodox Army. I don't know how big the Great Don Army is actually, but I know there might be one of the bigger groups. But you have your main ones would be the Donbass People's Militia, and look at there's been I think recently one of their commanders ended up getting killed with Motorola. He got killed a few months ago, and also, the the Batman Group got disbanded. And it actually has like what looks to be like a Batman symbol on their flag. It's actually kind of cool. He was killed in an attack on January 1st, 2015, and the guy that ran that was Alexander Bednov. And it's definitely an odd bunch. Not everyone that's on that side is, good people. I mean, there's some people like the Rusich Company apparently that were made up of like Russian Nazis, which seems to be like a oxymoron because the Nazis, one of the main things was about conquering Russia. But apparently there are some Nazis inside of Russia. It's a weird thing that they see it more of a nationalist type thing and not realizing that was false nationalism. Anyways, going into the later parts of the show now, it's 10:25. Ukraine is now the United States war machine in Europe. That in Serbia they got involved in, and now that they seem to be getting involved in Ukraine. But apparently Trump talks a little bit different about Ukraine than Obama. But I saw something along the lines that Trump told the Ukrainians something. I don't know. I think that I know that his. I think I saw something like that. Let me see real quick. I know I saw what I did. What I have seen is that his administration continues to, and a lot of people around him continue the same stance of that Russia is an enemy. Russia's a threat to the United States or whatnot. So look at that later. I've seen that the cabinet saying that, the people inside the cabinet. I don't know exactly what Trump's official stance on Ukraine is, but I've seen him talk during the campaign a little bit differently than his predecessor Obama. Obama's had a very strong stance of that we could never abandon Ukraine. The Ukraine is a victim of Russian aggression, and I saw the interesting thing is that he's kind of shut down some of the people that have talked badly about Putin. And he's made it seem like he's going to ease the relationships between Russia and the United States. But then again, there's many reasons why it can't happen, and a lot of it revolves on the people that are behind Trump. And also remember, like for example, Sheldon Adelson gave him a ton of money. Sheldon Adelson being a powerful Zionist. Well, the Zionists don't want Russia to be around. Israel has made a very big point that they are not friendly with Russia, and they have totally different interests inside of the Middle East. They've been very angry about the S-300 systems coming to Iran. And, the Zionists, it's a tool of the Rothschilds, and you have a country that has eliminated the Rothschilds from their country. Putin is fighting the New World Order. Israel, Tel Aviv is almost like the New World Order headquarters. So Zionism and Russia don't mix. And Sheldon Adelson, being a big Zionist financer, and gave Trump money. It's obvious. It obviously seems to be a conflict of interest there. Adelson is like he's a big financer for the Republican Party. Then the Democrats have like their own Zionist financer, Haim Saban. He's the guy who created the Power Rangers. He's a billionaire. You got Haim Saban is huge when it comes to his influence inside of the Democratic Party. And I can't forget the one that has a broad influence, not just the Democrats, but, the politics in general, George Soros. George Soros is a Hungarian billionaire who, a lot of people speculate about what he's behind. Some people say that he's behind the unrest inside the country, for example, from Ferguson to the Baltimore riots. George Soros is behind. He has his own little groups or whatnot that he influences, or he's really behind. I think MoveOn is one of them. That these in quotation progressive parties, and progressive. Term that seems to be used so many times inside the United States, but what the hell does it even mean? These people that often call themselves progressives are not progressive at all. These people are in favor of bankers continuing their grasp on the American people, and also at the same time they're supportive of the Democratic Party, which is another tool of the New World Order. George Soros, he has a lot of influence in the politics of the United States, and he's one of the main pushers of war. He's heavily anti-Russia, and there's a lot of people that say that he's a Nazi. As a young man, he was a guy that handed out deportation notices for the Nazis when he was young, so it would make sense for his hate towards Russia. And we got about 30 minutes left of the show, and also I see that Venezuela, Cuba, of course, they're not really welcoming this Trump presidency. Iran seems to be very at odds with the Trump presidency, so a lot of Russia's allies are not very happy with the Trump presidency, and. I think, Russia, of course, they're taking it with a lot of skepticism, but they seem to be playing diplomatic at this point, Syria has been kind of quiet since Trump has became president. I think they said something along the lines that if they are willing to work with them inside of Syria, that they're going to welcome it. And of course, that they wish that the United States would stop funding the terrorists and they would help them fight the terrorists. The United States have unleashed a monster amongst Syria, and Syria has been forced to fight it. And the America has talked about how they're fighting it, but they're the ones that are funding it. ISIS continues to receive money from the United States government. They continue to receive arms from the United States government, while ISIS is being combated by Syria. Syria gets bombed by the United States. Syria has really been a major victim of the regime change policy by the United States government, and it's continued on. And oh yeah, this is the statement that Trump said about Ukraine, is that he said, we'll work with Ukraine, Russia, and all other parties involved to help them restore peace amongst the border, along the border. Mr. Trump told Mr. Poroshenko, according to the White House. He said he stuck to a much more conciliatory tone compared to his ambassadors to the United States, Nikki Haley, who a day earlier took a hard line against Russia. The United States continues to condemn and call for immediate end to the Russian occupation of Crimea. Mrs. Haley told the world body the United States imposed economic and financial sanctions on They imposed that on Russia in 24, or imposed the economic financial Oh, sorry. I guess I got knocked off the air. I'm not exactly sure when I got knocked off the air there. Trying to look how far it was off so I can get back to where it was talked about. Let's see. This shows where, like it shows how long it was talking, the list of calls from earlier and whatnot. I guess I can't really see that because I'm in the call with UCRY Radio right now at the moment. Or actually, I don't know. But I was talking about Ukraine or whatnot, and I was just saying is that Petro Poroshenko might have been known in his own country, but he wasn't known over here in the United States too much. But Petro Poroshenko has definitely became more of a known name in international politics for what he's done to Ukraine, what he's done to their people, and what he's done he's went from being maybe only known in Ukraine to be known around the world, and it's notorious. He's a notorious individual. And he's been known for failure, and the people of his own country are pretty pissed off. The people around the people of Europe are just quite puzzled by him. I think is that now he's trying to get into the EU, and he have this guy Saakashvili telling people that Europe should be thankful for Ukraine because they prevented the Russian barbarians from coming into their countries. And they try to make it seem like Ukraine is like this world power that's able to hold off the Russians. Ukraine has talked this way before. Ukraine has said stuff along the lines that they believe they can handle themselves in a world war with Russia. They believe that they are this powerful powerhouse, and their military is so strong. But ultimately they would be crushed if they actually got into a military confrontation with Russia. I don't think it would last more than I don't think it would last more. I don't think it would last more than a few weeks. Maybe it would be like the Georgian War, where it was 6 days or whatnot. That's all it took in August of 2018 when Putin, when that was with Saakashvili. Saakashvili would be in 2 wars where he lost to Russia. He could lose 2 times to Russia in just a matter of a decade if he wants to start a war, soon with Russia, which I don't think he does, because it would be absolutely disastrous for him. It would be a PR nightmare for him because he's been, I think that the Ukraine has been trying to portray themselves as a victim, but how would they be able to portray themselves as a victim if they start a war with Russia? Around the world, they're not going to fall for that. Maybe they'll fall for that in the United States, that they're a victim if they get into a war with Russia. But around the world, people know that Ukraine's the one that's instigating a lot of the tension between Russia and Ukraine. Ukraine's also, as well, pushing. They've attracted the United States paratroopers to come over there. They've attracted the NATO in order to. They made NATO pretty much. They're pulling more troops right by the borders of Russia. In countries like Latvia, Estonia, Lithuania are now, building up around Russia. It's like Russia once said, it's like, oh, we're sorry we put our country in the middle of your military bases. From Seoul all the way to Warsaw, they got military bases stretching all around Russia, ready to pounce on Russia in the case of World War. Meanwhile, Russia's the ones that are supposedly the aggressors. Russia's supposedly the ones that are the ones that are responsible for this entire mess. And that they're the ones that are responsible for the war in Ukraine. Again, it's bullshit. The people that are responsible for the war in the Ukraine, they're in Washington, D.C., they're the bankers, and they wanted to spark a world war between the United States and Russia. That's their plan. They plan on Moscow being toppled, and them putting a Rothschild bank instead of Moscow. When that happens, or if that happens, because I don't think it's going to happen. I honestly don't, because I don't think they're, for one, I don't think they ever really are successful with their New World Order. I think that, or I think they'll be toppled. Honestly, I think they're going to be. And if they do take power, they won't be in power very long. I think the New World Order is something that's very preventable, and I see them being defeated. That's what I've said for a while. I've said that the New World Order is something that is definitely defeatable. Is definitely something that we can that we the people, we can resist, and if we get the knowledge out. And also, I think that that you see the tide turning right now. You see a lot of countries starting to flip towards Russia, starting to flip away from the IMF, the world bankers, all your big banking organizations, and I don't think that they're going to be successful. I think that the people are eventually going to prevail. To me, it's kind of evident with BRICS or whatnot that this is a major challenge to them, and you see how hard that they're trying to disestablish BRICS, and that they were able to install a government in India that's more pro-American. They were able to install a government in Brazil that was pro-American. So with those two moves, they've heavily destabilized BRICS, and they've made a much more cloudier future for the organization and this major challenge to the IMF. And the soon to be I don't know what's, and also the Russia and China. The question is this alliance that is, I don't know, may soon we'll figure out what is going on between the two. But in the meantime, it seems that between those two countries, that's off the body as well. But right now, it seems like the United States is taking a hard line against China, but then just recently they're taking a more soft China. And they seem to want this definitely separate Russia and China. I think that Russia should be very cautious with China, because they kind of have a history of ultimately being two-faced towards their so-called allies. And this is not something that's just happened a couple times or whatnot. This is not just something that's happened once. It's happened. We have a little bit of history. We had Syria. I can remember something like that. But then ultimately they ended up coming to the aid. North Korea, though, they voted for sanctions against them. So, like I said, not a couple times. It happened a few times, but then again, they've really made it not clear what their intentions are, and it's hard to say what China will do in the end. When it ultimately comes down to what side they pick. They pick BRICS and Russia, or do they pick the United States and the IMF? I think that they pick. In the end, I think that it'd be smarter to pick Russia. But I think with the current government there and a lot of the corporate ties, unfortunately, I'm going to think that they're going to pick the United States, and I think they're going to pick them because they're afraid, I think, of a war in the South China Sea partially, and I think that Chinese in the bankers, I think the Chinese they just have a lot of connections with the top bankers, and I don't know how connected the Li family are with the Chinese government,
the Li family are one of the most powerful families in the world, and if they're near the Chinese government, then China's going to be involved with that. Russia, however, still has, without China, without India, they still have, South Africa, I guess, and they got, that's about it. BRICS has definitely been reduced, but they can pick other countries in there. Like, for example, smaller countries like Iran, Malaysia, that have shown their interest into joining BRICS. They have countries like
countries like Venezuela, maybe they can put into BRICS. Those are all possibilities. Replace those roles that those countries had in there. Anyways, we're winding down right now. We're 10:47 already over here on the East Coast, and the whole Yemen, within just a few days of the Trump presidency starting, they already reported that there was drone strikes had happened, and that the continuation of the Obama-Bush legacy of drone strikes and the continuation of the last 16 years of the policy in the Middle East was continuing. It was Yemen, and I saw today that apparently, actually it was a few days ago, I saw about the situation over there, and that the fact is that Trump seems to be continuing the same stance, and also the Air Force, that he's going to bring an Air Force carrier or an aircraft carrier
over there, which is Yemen is like a proxy for Iran. And if Iran
and there's another place where Iran and the United States might meet, and it almost happened back in 2015 that they put like a little blockade. The United States telling Iran that they couldn't send anything more over there, and if they did send anything more over there, that they would face the consequences of the United States military. But eventually it kind of cooled down, and they kind of backed away from it, and in the end, it didn't
amount to anything. It didn't amount to any kind of explosion of the conflict.
They didn't end up in some major regional war or anything like that. But it got very close, and I would say it was one of the closest times they had been to World War III since the Cuban Missile Crisis. Was that standoff that happened in the spring of 2015 between the United States and Iran. And when that happened, that was
telling for the next few
years, that Yemen would come into play, and I think Yemen's going to also come into play. But I think Syria is going to be the ultimate catalyst for any kind of war between the United States and Iran. I think that we need to keep it a watchful eye, and tell people that Iran is no joke. Iran is 15 times worse than Iraq. The amount of carnage that would happen, and all would be it'd be meaningless. Any kind of war in Iran, we have no reason to attack Iran. Iran's not a sponsor of terrorism. It sponsors Hezbollah, which is not a terrorist group. It's a resistance and a militant group, but they're not a group. They're a militia group that fights against terrorists inside Syria, and they fight terrorists in Yemen. So shouldn't the people of America be shouting hooray that these people are fighting the people that would kill innocent Westerners? But no, is that they label them as a terrorist group inside the United States, and Hezbollah is demonized and vilified, and they make it, and it's also a pretty small force, like my guest was talking about last week, is that Hezbollah is not that big of a force, and people, they make it seem like in the Western media like these people are capable of bringing out the destruction of America or something like that. Hezbollah is smaller. I definitely wouldn't classify them as a terrorist group. I mean, they have been classified in the United States as such, but I think in some European countries even they're not classified as a terrorist group. They're not in Russia classified as a terrorist group. Who is a terrorist group that the United States supports is Muslim Brotherhood, which is in Egypt. They're predominant, and they continue to support them over there. But Russia classifies them as such. The United States doesn't classify Muslim Brotherhood as such, and the Muslim Brotherhood also is they have like their allies inside of Syria that are working with the Syrian rebels. But at the same time, I should say that the Egyptian government of today, even though they are against the Muslim Brotherhood, or at least the claim that that's their major enemy, they still continue to work with the same United States forces that support the Muslim Brotherhood, and they still continue a lot of the same tactics. And continuing on, and talk about the Middle East and over there in also Libya, I think that like a pro-Muslim Brotherhood group has kind of emerged inside. That's the one that runs the Tobruk government, which there's like two governments. There's the Tripoli government and the Tobruk government. The Tobruk government's the more openly Islamist group out of the two. But remember, both those forces came about the Islamists that toppled Gaddafi. I think that there's the Tobruk government, the Tripoli government, and there's also the other militias, and there's ISIS there in the country. But ISIS is a pretty small force. They've lost a lot of the ground that they had inside the country. ISIS at one point was a force that had took a lot of the Libyan territory, but now ISIS is a much smaller fighting force in Libya. Doesn't pose nearly the threat that it did before. Remember, they even did the beheadings of the Coptic Christians, and that's where they got a lot of the attention of having been in Libya. ISIS is also in the Sinai, and that's another thing that the Sisi government claims to be one of the major battles that he's fighting, is the insurgency of ISIS in the Sinai. Which, and again, is that I have my own opinion on him, Sisi. I think some of the people in the Truth community, some of the people in like the pro-Assad crowd or whatnot, seem to be kind of favor of him. I don't really. I mean, I used to be somewhat in favor of him, but I realized that he never turned the corner really with his stance on Israel. He still continues to support him, and in his ultimate, never really completely ditched the United States. Even though that he has relations with Russia, he seems to kind of fence it between the United States-Russia dilemma, and he doesn't really take a stand on that. And I guess maybe he would say that he's enjoying the support of both countries and getting the benefits of that, but any real leader would not enjoy the United States support. He would stand up to the United States, especially after what they've been responsible for in his country during Mubarak, during Sisi, who he claims, during Morsi, who he claims to be against both those previous leaderships. Mubarak, who he's put in jail, or kept in jail, I should say, because Morsi put him in jail, but Mubarak kept him in jail, and he also has Morsi in jail. Both those leaders were supported by the United States government, and Sisi claims to be against both of them, but yet Sisi doesn't do anything about the United States government influence the country that was even brought about potential of the Muslim Brotherhood taking over the country, rather than whatever the people would determine. They were able to control the Egyptian revolution and bring about another pro-American leader after the Egyptian revolution took place. And that's when the Arab Spring in general, you could see what they did is that they were able to control that revolution. At the same time, they made a revolution inside of Libya that wouldn't have happened without the United States support, which wasn't a revolution, but rather mercenaries overthrowing the Gaddafi government and overthrowing the will of the people, I should say, as the people did not want Gaddafi overthrown. The people enjoyed the Gaddafi, the benefits and the improvement of the standard of life during the Gaddafi regime. But the policymakers in the United States, they're the ones that overthrew Gaddafi. They murdered Gaddafi, and they also decided it was time to take out Assad as well. And the people of Syria, the people of Libya, they've been, so heavily affected by regime change policies, and it seems like it's going to continue under the Trump presidency. I hate to say it. It seems, and people that were so hopeful that Trump would be different on the foreign policy because he talked different on the foreign policy, and it seemed to not be told globalist garbage when he was talking during the election, and it seemed like it had set him apart. And even at one point, he talked about, being neutral with Israel. But of course, if you heard what he said about it later, he's just going to pretend to be neutral, is what he said, in order to, get the Palestinians to sign a deal, which, he said that on national television. It's not, so apparently the Palestinians are not going to see that and be like, and the Palestinian leadership are not going to see that and be like, wait a minute, he's trying to trick us. And he said it on national television that he's going to try to trick us. It was actually really stupid what he did, because it's not something that's going to work. His supposed attempt to try to bring peace to the Middle East, I guess. That's what he's really saying. So that's part of the ego, that was shown of Trump, is that, is that he's trying to show to the people that he believes that he could bring peace to the Middle East, which would be, solve an Israel-Palestine situation. Obviously, of course, there's only one solution with Israel and Palestine, which is a secular Palestinian state. And I think that you bring back the identity of Palestine, because it is their land, and it was secular in the first place. But don't allow, again, also the Salafist to take over, the Wahhabist or whatever, to take over the country, because it would just be another form of the Zionist, different of the same bird. It would just be another wing of it if that happened. But no, if a secular state like what they have in Syria took over, and the Palestinians regained their land, that'd be the
point of no return, and nobody can stop it. Malcolm Little, when he knelt before Elijah Muhammad, that commented, kill the dinosaurs, changing the earth. They love to criticize, they always say I changed for the worse. Like prescription pills when you misusing them, nigga. The Templar Knights, when they took Jerusalem, nigga, and figured out what was buried under Solomon's temple, Al-Aqsa. The name is not coincidental. I know too much, the government is trying to murder me. No coming back like cutting your wrists open vertically. How could the serpent be purposely put in charge of the country? Genetic engineered sickness spread amongst me. My people are so hungry that they attack without reason, like a fucking dog ripping off the hand that feeds them. Immortal technique is treason to the Patriot Act. So come and get me, motherfucker, cause I'm not coming back. This is the point from which I can never return, and if I back down